I'm Sheldon McLeod. This is Thinking Out Loud, presented to you here on the SaltWire Network, and I've been fortunate enough for the last several years to be able to do this. Prior to that, involved in other media, other organizations, and I've still call home the Lunenburg, Bridgewater area. And in the spring of 1999, I was the news director in a small town. I'd taken a walk down Main Street. There was the candy store. There was a music store. It was a vibrant downtown. And then there was this other business or space. And I took the long walk up the stairway to find out more about this organization called Second Story Women's Center. And I clearly had no idea that I would still be interested in talking about this many years later. Second Story Women's Center has been around for a long time. They've moved locations to Lunenburg in the last number of years. Their mission, Second Story Women's Center, supports women and gender-oppressed people, provides safer spaces and advocates for social change. Their vision, gender equity and safe, healthy relationships on the South Shore. But, dear community, they've recently posted, we've heard from many of you concerned about the current closure of the center. We're in the midst of some significant changes to our board of directors, while also working to bring operational focus back to collaboration and transparency so we can better serve our clients and community. There was a post I saw as well on Facebook. Second Story Women's Center, the women who built it, the women it supports, stand up for Second Story. There is an event happening on Friday, March 31st at the Lunenburg Fire Hall at 6 p.m. And it says, bring a windproof candle. To find out more, I reached out to the organization, and Sue Bookchin joins me to talk today. Sue, it's so nice to see you. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Sheldon, for putting a spotlight on this.
What is your connection to or relationship with Second Story?
So I think I also first went into Second Story in 1999. So it is a long history. And just to be clear, I have no formal position at Second Story. I'm a community member and a member of the organization, like many women and men in the community. And so I don't have an official or formal position in this. But I think that I started with Second Story doing some workplace education work with them when I was doing that kind of work. And so I got to know them quite well. I volunteered. I was on the Social Action Committee. I sat on the board for several years. And then I was volunteering about some initiatives regarding gender-based violence some years ago, and there was a call for proposals that came from what was then Status of Women Canada to do a coordinated community response. And so we wrote that proposal and got that funding for a 3-year project, and that's what started the Be the Peace project that happened in our community for 3 years. And that morphed into I and a number of the founding people started Be the Peace Institute. So, we consider Be the Peace Institute, Second Story, and Harbor House in our community, which is the shelter, to be sister organizations, all doing dedicated work for gender equity and trans inclusion, and trying to make the world better for women and their rights and opportunities.
And to be perfectly clear, Second Story isn't on hold right now because all of the issues have been solved and all the problems have been fixed.
Yeah, if only that could happen in my lifetime. I kind of doubt it. And so Second Story, so this is their 40th anniversary. And for any nonprofit organization to exist for that long is really a feat of some persistence, because there are always issues, there are always funding issues, there's always capacity issues. But the primary reason that centers like Second Story exist is to serve women. Women who move to the area come in to the center in order to start making connections. Women who are experiencing violence in relationships or have been sexually violated or are dealing with family abuse issues. There aren't that many places they can come and get non-judgmental, trauma-informed, compassionate listening, as well as skilled counseling for free. It was interesting as we were looking back, there were over 1,200 free counseling visits provided by the staff at Second Story in the past year. They also do programs. There has been a lot of work with youth in schools, like the Healthy Relationships for Youth program, that is a violence prevention initiative, and how to build relationships that are respectful and dignified and don't include violence. So there are thousands of students who have had the benefit of the work that Second Story has been doing in different ways. And for years, when I first went into Second Story, they were doing assertiveness programs for girls. In the summer, they've done the Girl Talk program for girls between ages 9 and 12. There's so much programming, and that is, mindfulness, stress relief, all the things that we all need in order to just grapple with this complex and pressured life that we're in. And those are all free for the community. So, but for some people, during this time that the center has been closed for the past couple of weeks, there are people for whom Second Story is a lifeline, literally. And so it's heartbreaking that now is on pause because there's no staff to be able to staff the center because of what's gone on. My apologies for getting emotional. There's been a lot of strain on a lot of people through this.
What happened? Why is this happening?
The $64,000 question. So what I understand, and I can tell you how the community of women got involved. In late January, the staff put out a call for help to women in the community who had been on the board, had been volunteers, who they knew were very connected and committed to Second Story. And what we heard that evening was kind of shocking for us, which was that the staff were feeling very uncomfortable about the workplace that had developed because of the board interfering in their work, overreaching from their governance model, badgering them for reports on things that were easily and readily available. There was some question about paid sick time. As with many things that blow up into major conflicts, it often starts with something simple that could easily be resolved by sitting down and talking together. And so we actually have no idea what is at issue with the board that insists it's still in control of the organization. We have no idea. But it got to the point where people were taking stress leaves. And then, for instance, the board chair stepped in as the executive director without resigning from the board, which is a conflict of interest on any nonprofit board. And the board members started coming into the center regularly to kind of look over their shoulder. And the staff were very disturbed and asked repeatedly to meet with the board or to come to a board meeting to work out the issues, and the board refused to meet with them. It seems like a small group, which was the executive at the time, also the personnel committee, were handling everything and not even sharing their concerns or what was going on with the other board members. And we heard that directly from a board member who finally had to resign because it was untenable for them. So the thing that was most startling was just how pained and devastated the staff were. Now, it's a rare thing when you have a staff team doing anything that works really effectively together And this was a staff complement where that was true. They supported each other, they collaborated well together, they trust, they share, they were running the center in a way that we imagine we would love women's centers to operate. And so these people have been devastated by what's happening. And it's kind of like an abusive relationship, Sheldon, with somebody who is in that state of coercive control, is they pick away at you little by little by little by little until you are stripped of confidence about what you're doing. You have to justify everything that you're doing. And this is not a feminist, human-centered, trauma-informed way to do work. And so this apparently had been going on for some months. And so at the point that the staff reached out to the community, it was pretty awful. And they also had an attempt at mediation. One of the local women who has been connected with Second Story has been a mediator for many decades. And they were asked by the board to be involved in a mediation. And that process started, which of course it always starts with meeting with each of the parties separately, so with the board and then with the staff, and then finding a way and a time for everyone to come together to talk together about what is needed. And eventually the mediator even gave up because the board kept delaying and throwing up obstacles, and the mediator's sense at some point was that they really are not engaging in good faith, that they really don't want to engage with the staff. And that has been borne out over and over again. So this group of women, seeing the harm that had come to the staff, got together and said, we have to do something. This is untenable. And so we had a number of meetings with, up to 50 women in the room, trying to strategize about what to do. So we asked the board if a small group of us could meet with them. We sent individual emails to the people that we knew on the board. We asked what was going on. We asked how we could help. We did everything we could possibly think of in order to help resolve whatever was at issue, which really wasn't clear. And none of those efforts were successful. And because of the kinds of things that the staff was sharing with us about the board's responses and their refusal to meet, or even to tell the staff what was at issue about their work. I mean, if you have an issue with people's performance, you do a performance review. Those kinds of things were not done. And so ultimately, after many attempts, we decided that we needed to look at the bylaws and see if we could oust the board. So the only bylaws that were on, I'm trying to stay in the frame. The only bylaws that were on record at the Registry of Joint Stocks indicated a couple of things. One is that the board is accountable to the membership, and that half the registered members could call a general meeting in order to, now I don't think it's specified, vote in or vote out board members, but in the absence of that, then there is the possibility that the general membership can pass a special resolution. So we did our due diligence with the board membership of registered members. We got 50% of the signatures. We sent out the notice. We followed all the rules. We checked with the Registry of Joint Stocks to ensure that what we were doing was legitimately following those bylaws. And we called a meeting. We presented a special resolution that the current board leave and resign immediately. And we then elected a slate of new board members. We sent that to Joint Stocks. Joint Stocks approved it. We sent all the information about the new board members, and we thought, okay, this now can all start from scratch. Let's go back to the governance model and ensure that the board is not violating the governance model, which the old board has repeatedly. And then we can start over, we can see. But actually before that meeting happened, the staff felt that the whole situation was so untenable that they resigned en masse, every single staff member. And 2 of those resignations they accepted right away, the board, and the other ones they negotiated to stay on so that the center could remain open, or until, I don't know, because what else could they do but have some staff stay, and with no explanation of why they accepted some and not others. And so a few people stayed on in an attempt to keep the center open, but then it was clear that that was untenable because you can't run a center with only 3 staff. They can't work all the time, and the board wanted to increase the hours. And anyway, it was just torturous for them, and they were getting letters with barely even veiled threats of disciplinary action and legal action if they didn't comply with what the board wanted. And so the day after that special meeting that elected a new slate of board members, the old board members went back into the portal at Joint Stocks and put their names back on as board members. I believe this happened twice. At some point, Joint Stocks, decided that they really couldn't devote their resources to be the arbitrators of who's the real board. The same with the bank, because the old board was now spending a lot of money on things like an audit with an outside accountant, even though the current accountants do a financial review every year, which is very close to an audit. So that's thousands of dollars. On some of their letters, they have CC'd lawyers, so we assume they were retaining lawyers, but we don't know. In all of our correspondence with the board, mostly we don't get any response whatsoever. And so then there is a whole debate about who's the real board. So the financial coordinator went to the bank and made an arrangement with the bank in order to pay the essential bills like the rent and the health benefits and payroll. But now the old board is not following that process. So the staff haven't been paid since March 3rd. Excuse me so much. So these are the things that are happening. And so we looked for help wherever we could. And because obviously this is just a group of community members. This is a group of warrior women, but women, with no particular standing or authority in the organization. And so we did have some advice from a charity lawyer about the bylaws, about what the rights were of the membership. And then we reached out to Status of Women, Provincial Status of Women, who is the funder. Actually, the funding for all women's centers and transition houses in the province comes through the Department of Community Services. The kind of the intermediary, or the person who has signed the people who signed the contract for those service level agreements, has been the Office of Status of Women. Those things are shifting. Status of Women is being brought back under community services. Anyway, so we reached out to Status of Women and said, is there anything you can do here? Here's what's going on. And this is devastating this organization. And so there are limited things that they could do. Eventually, they did come and meet with the staff and meet with the board, but that was before all of this, the general meeting was called. They felt like they don't really have authority to intervene. Finally, someone from Community Services, a senior strategist at Community Services, did meet with, or was attempting to get more information. And ultimately, last Monday, March 20th, those two people, the person from Status of Women and from Community Services, asked for a meeting with the old board chair, who is Charlene Flint, and the new board chair, who we had elected, to please, could we meet with you and figure out the path forward. Somewhere in between there, the old board, this is after the general meeting, sent a letter to the membership, and not even to the staff, only to the membership, saying we agree to resign on March 23rd. So they were giving a month's notice. So that happened in late February. And so on March 20th, when these two people met with the government people, what they said was the priority is to get the center reopened. The board has already said they will resign as of March 23rd. So we asked that the old board call a general meeting as soon as possible to elect a new board. And so that seemed okay. It's only a few more days. And then on March 23rd, the old board rescinded their resignation and said they are going to stay for some indeterminate period of time. They still haven't called a general meeting of the membership. We have pleaded with them again to abide by their agreement to resign on the 23rd, call a general membership, received no response. And now Community Services has suggested a board governance expert that the second story could hire to kind of adjudicate or observe the proceedings of a general meeting to ensure that that the general meeting goes according to the bylaws. Now, something that is a little confusing is that the old board had a different set of bylaws. And in that set of bylaws, it did say that only the board can remove board members. But that set of bylaws was never registered with joint stocks. So we had to go by the bylaws that were registered with joint stocks, which is what we did. Right. For some reason, whoever it was at Community Services kind of upheld the notion that the general meeting we held was not legitimate. And so they basically conferred continued authority onto the old board, which then, I think, personally, emboldened them to continue to be in this authoritarian kind of role with the center. And, you know, some of the correspondences are, I could use many words for how I would describe them, but the mildest word I could use is that they are mean-spirited. The staff have felt not only ignored and dismissed, but belittled and mocked and judged. And these are women with deep skills in the work that they do. And, in this sector, in the women's sector, it's mostly women who are doing the work without earning even a living wage and dealing with some of the most complex and painful situations that people experience. Like if you're a woman who has experienced family violence, domestic violence, and you're dealing with a criminal court, a family court, child protection, and all of the systems that converge that are supposed to help you, but actually really create a unique form of torture, particularly if women have children and they're in a relationship with an abusive person. And those are complex dynamics to manage. So for this staff, and some of them have been there more than almost 2 decades, one of them, who is a counselor who has been there, a trauma specialized counselor who has been there for almost 2 decades, was recently given a health provider award from the Mental Health Foundation. Like, these are good, skilled, caring, compassionate, very competent women. And they have felt completely torn down and desperate. So that's where we are now. And so we also, and we have tried not to get the media involved in this. We've tried to handle it as a community because we know the media can make a big deal out of something, and you never know how your words will be taken out of context. So I appreciate, Sheldon, when you said that you don't edit these things because you don't want to be seen as manipulating in any way. But we know that it can become a media circus. These things have happened. So when this was happening at Avalon Sexual Assault Center several years ago, it was a media circus. It has happened at women's centers, at transition houses. It happens in nonprofit organizations because all nonprofit organizations are run by volunteer boards. And it is often the exception that a board operates skillfully and in an expert way according to governance models of the ways that they're supposed to do things. I've sat on some dysfunctional boards. And so something that I'm noticing in the field, and then I'll get to the rally on Friday, or maybe I'll do that first and then tell you my bigger picture thinking about this is, so at this point, we feel like we do need to rally the community. There are a lot of supporters of Second Story Women's Center who don't know what's going on. And because there was a media story that the mayor of Lunenburg wanted to sell the old train station where Second Story is currently located. It seemed like Second Story might get evicted. And so people are thinking, oh, well, they've gotten evicted. That's why the center is closed. That's not true. They have just signed a 2-year lease with the town. So that is not the issue. And so we felt like we needed to tell the community what was going on and also have a show of support for Second Story Women's Center and the work that it has done. And that's the purpose of the rally on Friday at the Lunenburg Fire Hall at 6:00, to share what we know, to make a show of support for Second Story and all it has offered in the community, and then to honor the staff, because as of yesterday, even the staff who were left trying to continue with the operation of the center, they have decided it's untenable. And so as of yesterday, there are no staff left at Second Story. And I have no confidence that those staff will come back, even once the center opens again, because they have been so harmed. Like, they need some significant healing work just to be able to govern their lives at this point. It's affected their families. It's affected their ability to just cope. So we will also honor those staff at the event and do a candlelight vigil to the center.
I do want to ask, you said when it reopens, why are you confident that this can be resolved?
I feel like I have to be. There's a lot of doubt. I mean, if the old board doesn't resign, the center trying to open under that leadership, none of us would support that. If the board does resign and call a general meeting, then we feel like we can rebuild. We have to rebuild. To let that 40-year legacy go just because of a rogue board, that's such a deprivation for our community. These centers are more and more important as we, gender-based violence is not gone. Gender equity is not achieved. And in some ways, it's getting worse, along with the ultra right-wing kind of dynamic that's going on globally. Like, women are not at the top of the priority list. And so that effort needs to persist, and we need as many people as possible to be involved in that, including men who support gender equity. And so we have to hope that our efforts will be able to reopen the center. Confidence in that, I wouldn't say we're confident, but we can't not attempt that and do that in the best way possible. So apparently this governance person who has been hired has reached out to the newly elected board and asked to meet with people so that she has a clearer sense of the whole picture, which I honor and respect. And we intend to do just that. We don't know who among the group will be part of that, because this is an effort by an enormous amount of women, older women, younger women, women who are smart and savvy, and we are not going to give up. And will this old board be held accountable for the harm they have created? I doubt it, because there are not many vehicles for that to happen other than on an interpersonal level. I don't know how they will. So we don't know how that will happen. But the thing that it has really brought home to me is that there's a gap, not only in the women's sector with all the nonprofit organizations, but there's a gap in the whole nonprofit sector in when these things happen, when there's a dispute between a governing body and a staff in an organization. This is not all that uncommon. There is no structure for help. There is no place to reach out for help where you know that governance experts, maybe some legal experts, some mediation experts, you can call on to say, we have a big issue here. Can you help us resolve it before it gets blown out of proportion? And help us come to terms with how to move forward. So, this group of women who has been trying to help, we have limited options for who can help. And because nobody actually has authority to do that, even the funder, right? So the funders, Department of Community Services, really are the only authority, but they don't want to be doing that. It's not really their role to adjudicate these kinds of things, but where is the infrastructure of support? So if we want the women's sector to be vibrant and strong and resilient and expand and be able to meet the kinds of needs that we see, and particularly in rural communities where people are very spread out and the availability of services is much more limited than in urban centers. These are essential services. If we want those essential services to be there and we want them to have capacity, where is the support infrastructure for that to happen? So to me, there's a systemic issue here that we are grappling with the impact of.
There's a lot right in that last conversation that we've had to unpack and to discuss. And I want to thank you for opening up. I know this is not the end of this. It's the next chapter of Second Story, and I will stay in touch, that we will continue to follow this. And Sue, I just want to thank you for filling in some of the areas that were unclear and giving us a sense as to what's been happening.
Thank you so much, Sheldon. I appreciate the opportunity. Take care.